hantavirus, Ebola. Yes, Ebola again. And now, depending on which news cycle you caught this week, a growing list of things that make sitting in a pressurized metal tube with recycled air feel incredibly sus. Add fuel prices that have airlines charging you for the privilege of existing, fare hikes that somehow keep getting worse and worse, and service that has gone from to actively hostile. And I think a lot of cruisers are starting to be like me and ask the question they never thought they would, which is flying to my cruise port actually the right call anymore? Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. And full disclosure, I have always historically been on Team Fly. I'm talking capital T, capital F. No debate, no discussion. Now, I'm a Midwesterner. I live in the greater Cincinnati area, and that means I don't have the luxury of just a quick drive to a cruise port. Now, if I just live within maybe like 5 hours, I would definitely be Team Drive. But for me, the reason I've been Team Fly is that my closest options require a real commitment either way. And I've always defaulted to getting on the plane, getting there fast, and starting my cruise. And so then something happened. I just got home from Star of the Seas. I don't want to go into it. It's a long story. User error. I made a mistake. I just forgot to book the flight home. And look, I got a lot going on. I'm a mom. I have an actual job as a university professor. I cruise like every 3 to 4 weeks. It's a lot of things to juggle. And there's a lot of reasons why. It's not just that I'm an idiot, but I completely screwed up. And the night before disembarkation, I went to check into my flight and I had no flight. And only then did it dawn on me, I never booked it. So it wasn't a choice to be Team Drive. I was put in this situation. It wasn't a spontaneous, hey, let's make this a road trip. It was, at this point, less than 24 hours before getting off the ship, I have no choice because all the flight options are crazy expensive or there's no direct option. So you know what? We made an adventure of it. We rented a car. We were out of Port Canaveral. Thankfully, there are some car rental locations there. They are small. There's always long lines. So if you do rent a car out of Port Canaveral, make sure you get there super early. And we hit the road for 14 hours. And spoiler alert, it wasn't bad. It was actually fun. And I think I'm actually pivoting my stance a little bit from Team Fly to Team Drive. Now, I gotta be honest, because a big part of what made this a great experience is because we had ideal conditions. My man Bati, he drove the entire way. I'm a workaholic. I've always got stuff to do. So I was on my laptop on his hotspot the whole way. I got to be a passenger princess. I got work done. He enjoyed the drive. The weather was flawless. Traffic cooperated. It was this perfect combination of just ideal road trip situations. And we always enjoy each other's company too. So that's always great. Now, I have always been Team Fly, so I decided to pose this question to the online cruise community to see what other people think, because I started to think, man, this isn't bad. Maybe we should start doing this every single time. So I asked the community what they thought. Are you Team Fly or are you Team Drive? So I want to talk about the pros and the cons of both and give you an honest picture and also what everybody else thinks in the cruise hive mind. All right, let's start with what formerly were my people, and I'm talking the Team Fly people. Nicole H., she set the tone immediately. She said, 6 hours in a car is about her max before that antsy feeling kicks in. But she also made a case that I can't argue with, which is that even with a flight delay, airport people watching is, and I quote, top tier entertainment. So yeah, sitting around an airport is not exactly a fun time. I think most people would agree, but the people watching can be quite enjoyable. So I do understand that for sure. And that is one plus of flying. And I also agree with you, Nicole, that about 5-6 hours is my max. If it's 5 or 6 hours, I will just no question drive. But for me, there is no cruise port location that is within that distance. Now I did drive to Norfolk back in the fall on a cruise. I actually did 100% of the driving myself both ways. It was me and my friend Kelly, and that was actually very liberating. And we're going to talk about that, the pros of driving, but that was much less than 14 hours. Now, next I had Leslie J. She keeps it simple. She lives in Texas. So her closest port to her requires a 12-hour drive, which blows my mind because I'm like, okay, first Texas, Galveston, 12 hours, but Texas, it's a big one. It's a big old state. What do they say? Everything's bigger in Texas. By the way, I just had a cruise out of Galveston on MSC. It was wonderful. I have a whole video about it if you want to check that out. But anyway, let me share with you what Leslie J said. Her observation is that cruising out of anywhere but Galveston actually runs cheaper once you factor in flights from her region. So flying for her actually opens up itineraries and saves money at the same time. Now that's a really interesting perspective because I do think so much of this is situational and it's where you live. Now for me in Cincinnati, that Galveston cruise, it was actually really, really expensive because we just don't have great options out of CVG, which is my local airport, to Houston, to either of their airports. And long story short, I ball on a budget. I ended up flying into Dallas and then driving in. So, you know, I always like to try to save money, but the money factor factor in the routes and things that are available from your airport, that can really weigh a lot into your decision too, if you're gonna drive or if you're gonna fly. Now, Jennifer, she's like me, she's from the great state of Ohio, and actually it's confusing. I'm not in Ohio, I'm in Kentucky, but I'm right across the border. But anyway, Jennifer M, she's from the other side of Ohio. I'm southeast, she's northeast, and she drew a very specific line. Now for her, she'll drive to New York and Boston, but Florida, that's always gonna be a flight. Her reasoning, and this is another factor that you really have to consider, is pure PTO math. Because for Jennifer, if she were to drive south, that's gonna add at least 2 extra days to her trip. And obviously, if you have limited time off, that is time that you'd rather spend on your cruise, not looking at a windshield and not watching a bunch of trucks on a highway. Or if you have the disprivilege of driving through Ohio, you know, if you know, you know, a lot of just random hell is real billboards that dot the beautiful flat Ohio landscape. And that's the other thing too. Sometimes your drive might be more pleasurable and more scenic, sometimes not so much. And that can also weigh into it as well. Now that is a valid argument. So if you're trying to weigh flying or driving, you've got to think about your time off. Now I'm very fortunate. I have a flexible schedule. I teach all remote. So I was able to actually work from the car thanks to Bhatti's hotspot and his willingness to drive. But if you are limited on time off or you're working around school schedules, I have a kid that's in middle school, you do have these barriers that are going to influence whether or not you can fly or drive. Even if you want to drive, sometimes you can't because of the time issue. Now, Jody W., she offered a take that I loved. Her husband drives for a living. So for them, vacation does not begin until they get to the gate of the airport. For them, the airport is that starting pistol. And I understand that. If you do it for a living, you probably don't want to do it for leisure. So I understand that as well. And Bobby S., who I want to quote verbatim because there's no improving on this. She said, "Living in dog years, I fly to make the most of my time." And you know what? Bobby, the older I get, the more I feel that on a certain level. For me, it's not even about money, it's time. Time is that currency. You gotta do what you love. And that's why I travel so much. People are like, oh my God, how much do you spend on cruising? It doesn't matter. If I can afford it, I can afford it. And even if I can't afford it, that's what credit cards are for. I'm kidding, kind of. All right, Stacy S. She actually ran the experiment. Ooh, as a professor, I am a math nerd. I love analytics. I love this kind of stuff. So she actually ran an experiment. She drove from Pennsylvania to Miami and back, and it was 22 hours behind the wheel. Her verdict, she did not feel relaxed when she got home. She was exhausted. Her car was a mess, so that influences her decision to fly. That's another factor as well. Now for me, I actually find flying to be really exhausting. I actually like to drive. In this case, I had my man drive because I had professor stuff to do on my laptop. But generally, flying for me is just kind of a miserable experience. Even though I pay for all the extra stuff that's supposed to make it like incrementally less miserable. I pay for a Clear subscription. For international flights, I have TSA PreCheck. I've even paid for Clear Concierge. I have status on Frontier. I do like to fly the Walmart of the skies. And when you got that platinum status, it's actually really nice. And lounge access. And even with all that stuff, it's just still not a fun time. And for me, flying is more exhausting. I always feel really dirty too, as a like OCD germaphobe. So those are other things too that weigh into it for me. But I feel that if you're the kind of person that really doesn't like to drive, or if you are the kind of person that just gets exhausted by it, flying is absolutely going to be the move. So those are the benefits of flying, obviously, right? You get there a lot faster. If you have limited PTO, that's a huge consideration and sometimes forces your hand, even if you would rather drive. And sometimes people just don't like to drive. So now I want to talk about the other side. All right, so let's see what Team Drive has to say. All right, let me find this one because this was a really good point. Okay. Craig M. from Cleveland. Okay, Ohio is showing up on this one. Craig drives to Port Canaveral, he says, every single time. Why? Because flying a family of 5 to Orlando is simply not in the budget. And I heard this a lot. He says, the huge value add of driving is an opportunity to stop at Buc-ee's. And Midwesterners, and actually Texans, if you know on this one too, Buc-ee's is like a thing. Now we have a Buc-ee's in Kentucky. Oh, that rhymes, I love that. But anyway, I'm kind of over it, so I don't get the whole Buc-ee's thing. But if you've never been, you should go. So if you don't live near a Buc-ee's, driving might give you the opportunity to see that. But Dave's larger point, he has a big point, a great point here, which is the cost factor, right? Like even if you fly budget carriers like me, and I have, like I said, platinum status with Frontier, so I get like free checked bags, I get free seat selection, but even with that stuff, especially now because fuel prices are going crazy, I can still end up paying like $250, $300 just for a flight, a short flight from CBG down and back to Florida. And that might not sound like a lot, but if you got a family of 5, that's $1,500. So that actually makes, obviously, driving a much cheaper value proposition. Now, of course, you do have to consider the high gas costs right now for a car too, right? But you got to do the cruise math and figure out what works for you. And Matt S. talked about Buc-ee's. Matt's from Pittsburgh. Elizabeth C. in Atlanta said, Buc-ee's, but also she lives in Atlanta and she said she hates that airport and wants to avoid it at all costs. Now, Rana C, she's from Western Kentucky. Hello, fellow Kentuckian. And she said that her daughter's full argument for driving was, we can't stop at Buc-ee's on a plane. Okay, enough about Buc-ee's, people. And again, I'm over it. I've been over it, but I do see the allure if you've never been. Let's talk about some other reasons to drive that aren't massive gas stations. Now, Kim A from Rhode Island, she makes a point that connects directly back to what I talked about in the opener. And that is that they drive to Florida ports partly because of the sickness factor. Her exact words are, most sicknesses are not from the cruises themselves. It's from the plane rides to the ports. And with everything circulating lately, she's not entirely wrong. And I found that interesting. Now, I do think that cruise ships are floating petri dishes. All the cruise haters always say that, and I want to get indignant and be like, but they're not. But yeah, they kind of actually are. But if we're being honest, if cruises are floating petri dishes, airplanes are flying petri dishes, and why not avoid one if you can help it? So I understand that completely. Now, Allison A, she gets very practical, and this is a reason I actually do love to drive, and that is no liquid restrictions, no baggage fees. You can pack what you want, and when the cruise ends, you are on your own timeline. You're not rushing and hustling to get a flight. You just get in the car, and if you want to stick around longer, you can. If you're feeling energetic and you want to get up and go, you can. And I love that. I thrive on freedom and independence and being able to do what I want when I want, and that actually is a huge benefit of driving. So when Bati and I drove back from Port Canaveral, we decided to make a couple of pit stops, and it was just really nice to have that opportunity. And man, to not have to weigh everything and put things in baggies and not worry about the bag restrictions and the weight of your bags, it's so nice. I always make videos about all these packing tips for cruisers, and they really just apply to people that drive for the most part, because on a cruise ship, they don't care how heavy your bag is. They're not charging you for that. So it really is just a factor for those of us that typically fly. And a lot of people echoed this comment too, including Jamie P, who said, I get to pack whatever I want. Full-size bottles, no weight limits, no TSA interaction whatsoever. Now, TSA, I know you got a hard job. You've had a hard year. I have mad respect for what you do, but unfortunately there are some TSA agents who just really don't enjoy their jobs, and it makes it stressful. And for me, I hate that part of flying, of all of the packing and preparing and rushing and worrying that you're gonna miss your flight, and then going through TSA. And I usually can't even semi-relax until I get through TSA and I'm actually at my gate and I see the plane is there. I've looked at FlightAware, Flight Tracker. I know the flight is on time, all of that, because it's just stressful. And so driving eliminates a lot of that. Now, Bobby V from Louisville, she drove to Miami with 6 kids. Oh, I don't know if I could do that, but it depends, I guess, on if they get along or not. But they drove overnight taking turns, and she very specifically called out the Drury Inn's free dinner and 3 complimentary drinks as a part of her strategy. And Bobby, I can see why you like those 3 complimentary drinks if you're driving with 6 kids. Greg W from Michigan drove 22. Oh, okay, that's pushing my limits. I'm starting to come around to team drive. I could not do 22 hours. That's crazy. But he drove 22 hours from Michigan to Miami. He said it was mostly fine, except that the mountains at night and rain and fog were what he said were pushing the limit. So that's another thing too. Like I said, Ohio, it's boring, but at least it's safe. It's flat. We don't have the mountains. So when I drive to and from Florida, I do have to go through the Smoky Mountains, which are beautiful, but it's dangerous, especially with all the trucks and the curves and things like that. Fine to drive in dry conditions in the daylight, but at night, if it's raining or foggy, that can be pretty difficult. And here's a nuance I want to add. Angelo D has gone the other way. He's gone from team drive to team fly. And I want to share with you his rationale, because like I said, I am a nerd. I do love some cruise math. Once you add up all the things, parking, fuel, the extra food that you kind of have to get when you drive, and either a car rental or wear and tear on your own vehicle, flying starts to win out. So the important takeaway here, and I agree with you, Angelo, is you can't just assume that one is cheaper than the other. So much of it is situational. Obviously for big families, if you got 5, 6 kids, it's probably gonna be cheaper to drive almost all the time. But if it's just a couple, or if you're a solo traveler, flying is probably gonna win out. So the benefits of driving is bigger groups are gonna be cheaper. It can be much less stressful, assuming that you don't hit traffic along the way or bad weather conditions, but those are just a toss of the dice. You never know what you're gonna get. But the big thing for me is you do have that independence, that freedom, and that flexibility. And also, especially right now, less of a likelihood of getting sick because you're not going to be in a contained flying metal tube. So I want to know what stance you take. Are you team fly or are you team drive? So I have definitely started to come around. I used to say 5, 6 hours. I think I'm now still team fly, but I've upped my driving threshold to probably about 14 or 15 hours. So probably wouldn't drive to Galveston, Miami, Everglades, certainly not out West Coast, but I'll do it for Canaveral, Norfolk, out of New York, all of these home port destinations destinations that are less than 14, 15 hours. Now, if you are flying, just a few best practices. Always know you never want to fly in the day of embarkation. You play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. You want to book the day before, budget the hotel, treat it as part of the trip. It's always cheaper to do that than missing your ship because stuff can happen, especially right now. Flying just seems like such a crapshoot. So build in a real buffer for those delays. And if you're driving, the same basic rule. You can't just assume, hey, even if it's a 5 or 6 hour drive, I can get up really early and make it on embarkation day, because there can be traffic jams, things out of your control. So driving in the day before is always a good bet. And of course, if you're doing a long drive, consider splitting it across 2 days. Now, we were okay to drive it straight with 14 hours. I may be able to do a longer than that if we stopped and maybe did get a hotel the night before, maybe like a couple of hours from the cruise port location, but I wouldn't risk driving in same day if it's 5 or 6 hours or more. Now, of course, if you are driving in too, you've got to consider the parking factor, unless you do a one-way rental, which I probably will do if we drive out of Port Canaveral again, because I have an expensive car with expensive gas. I don't want to put wear and tear on it. I don't want to pay for parking. And surprisingly, our rental coming from Canaveral to home was surprisingly cheap. So I think that's the way that I'm going to go, but I want to know what you would do. Are you team fly or are you team drive? And if you're willing to drive, what is your threshold? And the big question, is Buc-ee's worth it or is it totally overrated? Drop your comments down below and let's talk ship.